Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with Part 23, Monuments, the Serapis-worship, Part 2, the worship of Mithras and Serapis, from the Gnostics and Their Remains, Ancient and Medieval by C.W. King. 3. Monuments of the Serapis-worship. Innumerable are the statues, bas-reliefs and gems, many of them in the best style of Roman art, emanating from the worship of Serapis, a thing not to be wondered at in the case of a divinity whose idea involved the two strongest principles that actuate the conduct of mankind, the love of riches and the fear of death. For the god of the subterranean world was necessarily lord also of its treasures, a truth expressed by the dedication to Serapis of an altar as Iovi custodi et genio thesaurorum, Winkelmann, Piers Graves de Stosch, page 83. And similarly, the older Roman Pluto takes the title of Jupiter Stygius, but the comprehensiveness of the idea as expanded by the monotheistic tendency of later times is most fully manifested by the invocation one Jupiter, Serapis, holy name Sabaoth, the light, the dayspring, the earth. Talismanic gems very commonly bear the full-length figure or the bust of Serapis, with the legend thus, often abbreviated into thus, there is but one God, and he is Serapis, the one living God. Sometimes the purpose of the amulet is distinctly expressed by the inscription, baffle the evil eye, O Serapis, or in the curious example published by Calus where the god stands between Venus and Horus, and the legend intimates that the gem had been so engraved in consequence of a vision or other divine intimation. Around his bust on a jasper proun appears the invocation, convincing proof of his supposed supremacy. Protect Jupiter, the ancient king of heaven, being now degraded to the rank of an astral genius and benignant horoscope. Invocations like the above bear the unmistakable stamp of the age when the old liberal mythology of the West, which had pictured heaven as a well-ordered monarchy peopled by innumerable deities, each one having his own proper and undisputed position therein, was fast giving place to the gloomy superstitions of Syria, which made the tutelary divinity of each nation or sect the sole god of heaven, condemning those of all other races as mere deceivers and evil spirits. There are, however, many gems, fine both as to material and workmanship, which give us, besides Serapis, the primitive Egyptian gods, exactly as they appear in the most ancient monuments, but engraved in the unmistakable style of Roman art. Most of these are to be referred to the efforts of Hadrian to resuscitate the forms of that old religion whose life had long before passed away, in this equally with the grander department of sculpture. Under his zealous patronage, the religion of the pharaohs blazed up for a moment with a brilliant but factitious luster, a phenomenon often observed to precede the extinction of a long-established system. Sharing in his Benares observes that the Hindus are now building and restoring temples everywhere with greater zeal and cost than at any time since the final overthrow of Buddhism, and yet the religion itself is utterly worn out. To this period belongs a beautiful sard of my own, which represents Serapis enthroned exactly as Macrobius describes him, whilst in front stands Isis, holding in one hand the sistrum, in the other a wheat sheaf, with the legend, "Immaculate is Our Lady Isis." This address is couched in the exact words applied later to the personage who succeeded to the form, titles, symbols, and ceremonies of Isis with even less variation than marked the other interchange alluded to above. The Black Virgins, so highly venerated in certain French cathedrals during the long night of the Middle Ages, proved, when at last examined by antiquarian eyes, to be basalt statues of the Egyptian goddess, which, having merely changed the name, continued to receive more than pristine adoration. Her devotees carried into the new priesthood the ancient badges of their profession, the obligation to celibacy, the tonsure, the bell, and the surplice, omitting, unfortunately, the frequent and complete ablutions enjoined by the older ritual. The holy image still moves in procession as when Juvenal laughed at it, 530, escorted by the tonsured, surpliced train. Even her proper title, Domina, exact translation of the Sanskrit Isi, survives with slight change in the modern Madonna, Mater Domina. By a singular permutation of meaning, the flower borne in the hand of each, the lotus, form a symbol of perfection, because in leaf, flower, fruit it gave the figure of the circle, as Jamblichus explains it, and therefore of fecundity, is now interpreted as signifying the opposite to the last, virginity itself. The tinkling sistrum, so well pleasing to Egyptian ears, has unluckily found a substitute in that most hideous of all noisemakers, the clangorous bell. But this latter instrument came directly from the Buddhistic ritual, in which it forms as essential a part of the religion as it did in Celtic Christianity, where the holy bell was the actual object of worship to the new converts. The bell in its present form was unknown to the Greeks and Romans. Its normal shape is Indian, and the first true bell founders were the Buddhist Chinese. Again, relic worship became, after the 3rd century, the chief form of Christianity throughout the world, which finds its parallel in the fact that a fragment of a bone of a Buddha, that is, holy man in whom the deity had dwelt during his life, is actually indispensable for the consecration of a Dagobah, or temple of that religion. Equally, as a similar particle of saintliness is a sine qua non for the setting up of a Roman Catholic altar. Very curious and interesting would it be to pursue the subject and trace how much of Egyptian and second-hand Indian symbolism has passed over into the possession of a church that would be beyond measure indignant at any reclamation on the part of the rightful owners. The high cap and hooked staff of the pharaonic god become the mitre and crozier of the bishop. The very term, nun, is Coptic, and with its present meaning, the erected oval symbol of productive nature, christened into the Vesica Piscis, becomes the proper framework for pictures of the divinity, the crux ansata, that very expressive emblem of the union of the male and female principles whence comes all life, and therefore placed as the symbol of life in the hands of gods now, by simple inversion, chances into the orb and cross, the recognized distinction of sovereignty. But to give a last glance at Serapis and his attributes, his bust on gems is often accompanied by a figure resembling a short truncheon, from the top of which spring 3 leaves or spikes. Can it be some plant sacred to the god, or else some instrument of power? Certain it is that Iva, a Syrian god of thunder, carries in his hand a fulmen of somewhat similar form in the Ninevitish sculptures. A dwarf column supporting a globe, a corded bale, the letter M, are all frequently to be seen in the same companionship. Perhaps the Greek numeral equals 40, which was the number sacred to the Assyrian Hoa, god of water. A conjecture, therefore, may be hazarded that these figures symbolize the 4 elements under the protection of the Supreme Lord Serapis. Another symbol is of such mighty import in the domains of the Lord of Souls that its discussion may fairly claim to itself the space of the following section. Figure 7, Isis. 1 lotus on her brow, holding a scepter, sardonyx, muirhead. Page 175. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.